Have you ever sat across from someone you love and felt, somewhere deep in your chest, that they just weren't really there? Not physically. They were right in front of you, but emotionally, fully, in the way you actually needed, somewhere else entirely. Like there was glass between you, and no matter how carefully you chose your words, how soft your voice got, how hard you tried not to make them feel accused, the glass stayed, and eventually you started to wonder if maybe the problem was you. I want to talk about that today, but I want to talk about it from the other side of the glass. Because here's the thing, I kept getting wrong for years. I spent so much time trying to understand what was happening to me in these relationships, what I was feeling, what I needed, what I deserved. And I never once stopped to ask what was actually happening inside of them. Not because they deserved more compassion than I did, but because if you don't understand what's happening inside someone, you will keep misreading them. And misreading them keeps costing you. So, this is my honest attempt at a translation. If the avoidant person in your life, or the avoidant parts of yourself, could drop the armor for just one unguarded moment and tell the whole truth, I think it would sound something like this. Most people hear the word avoidant and picture someone cold, selfish, someone who doesn't care. And honestly, I get why that's the story we tell, because from the outside, that's exactly what it looks like. The behavior reads as indifference. It reads like a choice. But here's what I keep coming back to. It's not a choice. It never was. Avoidant attachment typically develops when a child's emotional expression doesn't get a response or gets met with rejection. Behind it is usually a caregiver who expected the child to be tough, who rejected emotional outbursts, who was emotionally distant even while meeting physical needs. Think about that for a second. A small child reaches out, not for much, just for what every child is wired to reach for. And the message they get back over and over is that their need is inconvenient, that their feelings are too much, that the way to be loved is to not need anything. So they learn. They learn to be quiet about it. They learn to not reach. They learn that self-sufficiency is the safest version of themselves. And by the time they're sitting across from you in a relationship, genuinely trying, in the only way they know how, their core belief has already become, I can only rely on myself. Needing others is weak, which shows up as emotional distance, difficulty being vulnerable, and deep discomfort with depending on anyone. They're not withholding because you don't matter. They're withholding because they learned, at an age when the lesson couldn't be unlearned, that showing what matters is dangerous, which is wild when you think about it. The very thing you're asking for, closeness, honesty, the real them, is the exact thing their entire nervous system was trained to treat as a threat. Now, here's where it gets hard, and I want to stay in this part with you because I think this is what most videos skip over. When an avoidant person pulls away during conflict, when they shut down, go blank, give you one-word answers, suddenly become very interested in a wall, they're not punishing you. When they say they feel unheard right after you've just expressed hurt, that's usually internal overwhelm talking. They don't know what they feel. Your emotional presence creates pressure to locate and name something they genuinely don't have access to. And blame becomes the way they regulate. I know that doesn't make it okay. I'm not here to give anyone a pass, but sit with that for a second. They're not being strategic. They're not performing. They're genuinely flooded. Psychologists actually have a name for difficulty identifying and describing feelings, alexithymia. So, when you come to them full of emotion, asking them to meet you there, you're asking them to navigate a landscape they've basically never been given a map for. What sounds like a reasonable conversation to you can land internally as, "You're saying I'm defective. You're trying to change me. I'm failing you." Even when you say it gently, even when you say it with love, their nervous system hears, "You are the problem." So, defensiveness rises, distance deepens, and you're standing there wondering what you did wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. Their nervous system was already in the conversation before you said a word. But here's the part I want to sit with the most, because I think it's the most important and the most unsaid. Avoidant partners are actually quite emotionally fragile, and when those defense mechanisms kick in, what's really happening is that a deep shame wound is getting activated. Shame, not guilt. Shame. Low self-esteem and deep-rooted shame are really common in people with attachment trauma. They may genuinely believe they're not lovable, that they're a burden, that once you see the real them, you'll leave. So, the honest truth, the thing the avoidant person in your life has almost certainly never said out loud, maybe never even fully admitted to themselves, is this. They're afraid of you seeing them, not because they don't want you to, but because underneath all that self-sufficiency, underneath the calm and the competence and the "I'm fine, I don't need anything," there's a very old belief that if you actually saw the real them, you'd go. The armor isn't arrogance. A lot of what looks like high self-esteem is actually defensive. It's compensation for really low self-esteem, sometimes self-hatred. I had to sit with that for a long time when I first understood it. Because I'd spent so long reading their distance as proof that I didn't matter, when the truer story was that they were terrified of what would happen if they let me matter to them. So, what would they actually say if they let themselves say it? I think it would sound something like this. I know I pull away. I know it feels like abandonment. I know you ask me what I'm thinking and I say nothing, and I can feel you deflate and I hate that. But I genuinely don't know how to find the words. I don't know where the feelings are. I've spent my whole life learning to not feel them immediately, and now you're asking me to locate them and hand them to you in real time. And I freeze. Not because I don't care, because the caring is so big and so unfamiliar that I don't know what to do with it. And also this. When you bring up something I did that hurt you, I hear it as proof that I'm exactly as broken as I always believed. I know that's not what you're saying, but that's what my body hears. And then I disappear into myself because I can't stand being the source of your pain and having no idea how to fix it. And maybe, if they were being fully honest, it would end with this. I want to be close to you. I do. I just don't know how. And I'm terrified that by the time I figure it out, you'll have already decided I'm not worth waiting for. Okay, I need to say something clearly here, because this is where understanding gets confused with excusing. Understanding why someone does something doesn't mean you have to absorb it. The issue with avoidant attachment isn't usually a lack of care. It's that increased closeness and intimacy tend to activate withdrawal, which means one partner ends up carrying the entire emotional load of the relationship. And that's real. That's your reality. And it deserves to be named. Because here's what I've watched happen again and again. Someone finally understands the psychology, finally stops taking the distance personally, finally gets to that place of genuine compassion. And then they use that compassion as a reason to keep showing up in a dynamic where they're the only one doing the growing. That's not love. That's self-erasure dressed up as understanding. The inner work, identifying the fears, challenging them, deciding to change, that belongs to them, not to you. You can't do someone else's inner work. You can only decide how long you're willing to wait at the door while they find the courage to open it. And here's the thing about avoidant attachment. It's an adaptation strategy learned in childhood to protect against pain. It served a purpose once, but as an adult, it blocks the very closeness the person actually craves. That last part matters. They do crave it. Depression in avoidant people often shows up as emotional blunting, apathy, over-reliance on work or distractions, a quiet, low-level emptiness that never gets voiced. The strategies that protect them from rejection also create profound isolation. They're not untouched by the distance they create. They live inside it too. They just have no language for the loneliness. So here's what this means for you. The shift that actually changes things isn't about waiting for them to suddenly become emotionally fluent. It's not about reading one more book and finding the perfect phrasing so they finally hear you. It's about seeing them clearly, seeing the wound beneath the wall, and then making a real decision about what you can and can't live with. Not from resentment, not from exhaustion, but from actual clarity. Because there's a version of this that works. Vulnerability can be practiced in small steps. Gradual exposure to closeness genuinely does build tolerance for it. Avoidant people can grow. They can become more present, more available, more willing to stay in the uncomfortable moments instead of vanishing. I've watched it happen. It's real. But it requires them to want it for themselves, not to keep you. Not because you threaten to leave, for themselves. Because they're tired of the isolation and they're brave enough to admit it. Real healing isn't about changing surface behaviors. It's about transforming the unconscious beliefs underneath the avoidance. That's a long road, and you don't have to stand at the beginning of it forever waiting to see if they'll take the first step. Here's what changes when you finally see all of this clearly. You stop making their distance about you. You stop reading every withdrawal as evidence of your worth. You stop making yourself smaller, quieter, easier, trying to become whoever feels finally safe enough for them to love fully. And in that space, you get to ask yourself the real question. Not, why won't they open up? Not, what am I doing wrong? Not even, will this ever get better? The real question is, can I be fully myself in this relationship? And are they willing to keep growing toward me while I do? Because that's what love actually requires. Not perfection, not the absence of fear, just two people who are both consistently, imperfectly, choosing to move toward each other. The avoidant person in your life is carrying core wounds they probably didn't choose and may not even fully see. You knew that already, somewhere. What I hope you also know now is that their wound is not yours to heal. Their truth is not yours to carry. And the most loving thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is to stop shrinking around their fear and start taking up the full space you actually deserve. Not as punishment, as truth. Because the version of you that stays small enough to feel safe for someone who was never taught how to receive love, that version of you is not love. That's just another kind of loneliness, and you've already been lonely enough.